When I moved back into my father's house, I wasn't expecting a warm welcome, but I also wasn't expecting open hostility. My name is Nathan, 28 years old, recently unemployed, and freshly single. The layoff came first, company downsizing, fourth quarter panic. The breakup came 2 weeks later, after 4 years, and one quiet realization that we'd outgrown each other. With rent overdue and options limited, I made a call I didn't want to make. "You can stay here until you get back on your feet," my dad said. It's not ideal, but it's home. Home had changed. He'd remarried 2 years ago, a woman named Karen, who sold essential oils out of the garage and smiled with her teeth, never her eyes. She had a son, Bryce, 17 and angry in the way that kids get when no one tells them no often enough. I'd met them once, briefly, during a tense Thanksgiving dinner that ended with Karen crying over undercooked stuffing and Bryce getting suspended for vaping in the guest bathroom. I arrived on a gray Thursday morning, cardboard boxes stacked in the back seat of my car. My whole life reduced to 6 shirts, 2 pairs of boots, and a laptop I prayed would survive another month. My dad hugged me at the door, brief and businesslike. "Glad you made it," he said. "We'll figure it out." Karen stood behind him, arms crossed. "Guest room's been cleared out," she said. "Hope you don't mind twin beds." Bryce barely looked up from his phone, muttering something about "great, another roommate." It wasn't anger that hit me first, just the cold air of being somewhere you're technically allowed to be, but clearly not wanted. The guest room smelled like lavender and something burnt. A faded inspirational quote hung above the bed. "This too shall pass." I stared at it for a long time, not sure if it was a threat or a prayer. I unpacked in silence. My dad had gone back to work. Karen was cleaning aggressively in the hallway, every clatter of the vacuum bumping against the wall like punctuation. That night at dinner, no one spoke much. Karen served quinoa and baked fish. Bryce asked if I had a job yet. I chewed slowly, swallowed. "Not yet," I said. The next morning, I found a laminated sheet taped to the refrigerator door. "House guidelines, respectful living." At first, I thought it was a joke. Then I read the list. No guests without 48-hour notice. No food after 8 p.m. Shared chores will be rotated weekly. All doors must remain unlocked when at home. No personal items left in shared spaces. Curfew, 10:30 p.m. At the bottom, in smaller print, "These rules apply to everyone." Except they didn't. That night, Bryce came in at midnight, reeking of weed and body spray. Karen didn't say a word. I'd been home for less than 24 hours, and I already felt like an intruder. Every movement was met with a glance, every question with clipped responses. I asked if there was laundry detergent somewhere. Karen pointed to the garage but didn't follow up. My dad said he'd pick up groceries on the way home. He didn't. "Karen does the shopping now," he said when I asked. "Just add what you need to the list." There was no list. Bryce spent most of his time in the living room, feet up on the couch, shouting into his headset while playing Call of Duty. When I tried to watch the news, he told me the TV was already in use and turned up the volume. Karen pretended not to hear. The second night, my dinner plate was smaller than theirs. A salad with no dressing and half a baked potato. I didn't say anything. I just ate it. Afterward, I started cleaning up, but Karen stopped me. "We don't do dishes until everyone's done," she said sharply, even though she and Bryce had already left the table. My dad got home late and disappeared into the bedroom without checking in. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, staring at that same quote. "This too shall pass." Maybe it would. Or maybe I was just learning how much could be tolerated before it didn't. At midnight, I heard Karen outside my door, whispering to Bryce. "I don't care if he's his son," she said. "This isn't permanent." I didn't move, didn't speak. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the next line to fall. It started with little things. A book I'd left on the nightstand was suddenly shelved. My laundry, folded but cold, left on my bed even though I hadn't asked. I came home one afternoon to find the blinds open in my room, my duffel bag moved, and the desk drawer I always kept closed, slightly ajar. "Just tidying up," Karen said when I asked. "Didn't think you'd mind." I minded. My room had always been my anchor, even growing up. The one place I could shut a door and just be. Now it was a space under surveillance. Her presence hung in the air like a scent, one I couldn't scrub out. I started locking the door when I left, but came home to find the lock removed. When I asked my dad, he shrugged. Karen didn't like the idea of locked doors, said it made her uncomfortable. "It's her house too." "It was my house first," I said. He didn't answer. Later that week, I was in the hallway when I heard Karen talking to Bryce through his cracked bedroom door. "He's a guest, not a resident," she said flatly. "Freeloader's just a word people get offended by when it's true." Bryce laughed. I didn't. I waited until the next day to bring it up to my dad. We were outside changing the oil in his truck, something we used to do together on weekends. "She called me a freeloader," I said. He wiped his hands on a rag. "Karen's just adjusting. It's been a long time since she had to share a house with another adult." "So have I," I replied. He didn't look up, just changed the subject. There's a moment when you realize someone isn't going to stand up for you not because they can't, but because they won't. That moment came quietly, with the hum of an engine and the smell of motor oil, and it didn't leave. By the third week, Karen had stopped pretending. She knocked on my door one night with a clipboard in hand. "Electric bill's gone up 22% since you got here," she said. "Just a heads up, maybe fewer showers, shorter lights, on hours, that kind of thing." I stared at her. I didn't realize using the lamp at night was a luxury. She smiled thinly. "Everything has a cost." That week, dinner changed. Where once I'd had a plate of whatever everyone else was eating, I now found small containers marked Nathan in the fridge. Usually leftovers, sometimes nothing at all. One night I opened the fridge to find 2 pieces of cold toast and half a boiled egg, with a note taped to the Tupperware. "We're out of groceries, sorry." At dinner, Bryce was chewing on a cheeseburger. "Rough economy," he said, glancing at me. "Tough for guys without, skills." Karen didn't correct him. My dad stayed silent too. That night, I made rice and ate it in my room. The smell of garlic bread drifted in from the kitchen, deliberately loud laughter following it. It felt choreographed, like a play staged just to remind me of my status. The next morning, I went to take a shower and found the hot water ran out after 40 seconds. Bryce walked past the bathroom whistling. "Karen says we gotta conserve utilities," he called through the door. "You know adult stuff." I started drying off before the water even stopped. My breath fogged in the mirror. That afternoon, I bought a cheap combination lock for my duffel bag and started keeping my laptop with me, even around the house. I also changed all my passwords. There wasn't a single fight. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just this slow, grinding campaign to remind me that I was temporary. That kindness had a clock on it. That I was not wanted. And worse, that my own father didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did. Maybe he just hoped I'd leave before it became his problem. It took me 3 days to work up to it. Not because I was afraid of my dad, but because I still believed somewhere in the quiet part of my mind that when I finally said it out loud, he'd hear me. Really hear me. And maybe that would be enough. We were in the garage again, changing a fuse in the breaker box. Something small, something familiar. I waited until his hands were full, then spoke. "Dad, I need to talk to you. About Karen." He glanced over. "What about her?" I took a breath. "She's going through my things, rearranging my room, leaving food out of dinners, the electricity thing. Bryce, too. It's not passive anymore. It's deliberate. I'm not imagining this." He didn't answer right away. Just finished screwing the panel back into the wall, then stood and dusted off his jeans. "You're not a kid anymore, Nathan," he said finally. "You're almost 30. This isn't summer break. This is real life. And Karen, she's adjusting. It's her house, too." I stared at him. "It was your house. It was mine before she ever moved in." "Things change," he said. "We all have to compromise." I opened my mouth, then shut it again. There was nothing else to say. Because I realized then, with the sharp, still clarity that always follows disappointment, that he wasn't going to help. Not because he didn't believe me, but because believing me would make things harder for him. He wanted peace more than he wanted truth. And I wasn't peace. I nodded once. "Got it." He clapped me on the shoulder like we'd solved something. I stepped back, feeling the weight of that moment settle into place. That night I lay in bed and thought about all the times he used to show up for me driving to weekend soccer games, helping with college applications, fixing my car the week before finals. Now, he wouldn't even say, "I'll talk to her." Silence has a texture, a shape, and that night, it pressed down on me like a closed door I knew wasn't going to open again. I came home late that Thursday, just after dark. After taking my laptop to a cafe for a freelance application, I knew probably wouldn't go anywhere. The house was quiet. Bryce's door was closed, the TV off. Karen was in the kitchen, wiping down a perfectly clean counter. I went to my room. My laptop wasn't there. First I thought I'd left it in the car. Then I tore through my backpack, checked the desk, the bed, under the blanket. Gone. I stepped back into the hallway. "Karen," I said, "have you seen my laptop?" She didn't look up. "Oh, that old one? I thought it was broken. Moved it to the garage with the donation pile." "You went into my room?" "I was tidying. It looked like junk." I said nothing. Walked past her, out to the garage. There it was, my laptop sitting between a broken toaster and a box labeled Goodwill Misc. My name still taped to the charger. I didn't pick it up. Not right away. Because it wasn't about the laptop. It was the assumption. The casual violation. Like my things didn't matter. Like I didn't. That night, I started locking the laptop in my duffel bag and carrying it room to room. I also hid my journal inside the air vent. Not because it had anything incriminating, but because it was mine. Later, I passed Bryce in the hallway. He smirked. "Looking for something, man? Maybe get a job and you can buy a lock." I kept walking. The next morning, Karen left a note on the fridge. "Please remember to label your items if you don't want them accidentally removed." Accidentally. That word hung in my head like a match about to be struck. I folded the note. Put it in my pocket. I didn't say anything. Not to her. Not to him. But something had shifted. This wasn't pettiness anymore. This was control. Surveillance. Erasure. And I was done pretending it would go away if I stayed quiet. The next day, I drove across town to a discount electronics store and paid cash for a wall clock with a built-in motion-activated camera. It looked like something you'd find in a school hallway. Plain white face. Plastic frame. Cheap hands that ticked a second behind. Perfect. I installed it in my bedroom that night, above the door, angled toward the dresser and bed. I didn't mention it to anyone, didn't hint at it, just kept everything exactly the same. 3 days later, I found an old webcam I used to use for Zoom interviews. I cracked open the casing, mounted it inside a decorative air vent cover, and placed it near the end of the hallway with a clear line of sight to the living room. The hallway camera was a gamble. It only had internal storage, no remote feed, and it ran hot after about an hour. But it would catch enough. Just enough. Once it was in place, I stopped reacting. I let Karen move things. Let Bryce make comments. Ate what I was given, slept with one ear open, and waited. Sometimes silence is misinterpreted as submission. I counted on that. Every night, I checked the footage. Quietly. Thoroughly. I downloaded the files to an encrypted drive, made backup copies, stored one on a cloud server under a dummy name I'd created during college. I wasn't looking for drama, I was looking for proof. The kind of proof that doesn't just confirm a feeling, but can't be explained away. I didn't need them to apologize, I needed them to be seen. The house grew louder around me. Not in volume, but in intent. Karen's accidents became more targeted. Bryce's jokes started to sound rehearsed. My dad stayed uninvolved, the passive glue holding everything together, while pretending nothing was falling apart. I said nothing. But every night, the clock ticked. The hallway lens blinked red, and the story they thought they were telling started to write itself one quiet frame at a time. The first recording came 3 nights after I set everything up. Karen entered my room around 11:40 p.m., holding a glass of wine. She didn't knock. She never did. I'd left the light off, the bed made, my journal half tucked under a shirt in the second dresser drawer bait. She went straight for it, pulled it out, flipped a few pages, and started reading aloud in a low whisper, mocking my handwriting, laughing at an entry about a job interview that never called back. Maybe if you wrote cover letters half as often as you whine, she muttered. She stayed for 10 minutes, put nothing back where it belonged. The second clip came 2 days later. Bryce stood in the kitchen with her while I was in the garage. The hallway cam caught the audio. "Bet you he's eating again," Bryce said. "Like he pays for groceries." Karen opened the fridge. "He always eats after we go to bed. Like a rat. Honestly, I'm tempted to spice things up a bit." Bryce smirked. "What? Like a laxative?" She looked at him, smiled. "That's an idea." She opened a drawer and took out a small white bottle, the kind she kept in her personal wellness kit. Unscrewed the lid, poured a bit into a plastic container, labeled, "Nathan, Pasta." They both laughed. The next morning, I pretended not to notice the change in taste. Finished the meal. Spent the afternoon quietly dealing with the effects. I didn't say a word. That night, I backed up the footage, marked the files, labeled them Karen Journal and Karen Lax 1, duplicated them to an encrypted thumb drive, hid that drive in the back of my car, inside a hollowed-out flashlight I hadn't used since college. No emotion, no rage, just precision. They thought they were clever, that I'd keep being the guest in my own home, grateful for scraps, too passive to push back. But I was never passive. I was collecting. And soon, they'd see exactly what I'd collected in their own words, in their own voices, in the house they thought they controlled. It happened on a Tuesday night. Karen made lasagna, Bryce's favorite, and served me a separate plate. Different pan, different texture. I didn't comment. I just ate it slowly, deliberately, while they laughed about something on TV. At first, it felt like nothing. Just dinner. 20 minutes later, I was doubled over in the bathroom. Sweating, shaking, clutching the sink like it might keep me from falling through the floor. My stomach turned over like it was trying to escape. I stayed there for an hour, cold tile. Shallow breathing, waiting for it to pass. The hallway camera caught the whole thing in audio. Me stumbling down the hall, retching through the door. Bryce whispering, "Did you actually do it?" And Karen answering, "He'll be fine. Maybe it'll knock some motivation into him." I replayed it at 2 a.m., wrapped in a blanket, jaw clenched so hard it ached. Then I reviewed the kitchen footage, her adding something to my food from the same white bottle. Same smile. Same joke. Different outcome. The next morning, I came into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. Karen glanced over, pretending surprise. "Feeling better?" she asked sweetly. "Maybe your stomach just can't handle responsibility." Bryce snorted into his cereal. I didn't respond. I went back to my room, locked the door, the new one I'd installed myself, and opened my laptop. I backed up every file, every clip, every whisper and insult and frame of her spooning powder into my food. I built a separate archive, encrypted it, then uploaded it to a secure off-site server. Folder name: Evidence, Final. Inside: Karen reading my journal. Karen tampering with food. Audio of Bryce egging her on. Me, sick. Her laughing about it afterward. No more doubt. No more assuming maybe it wasn't that bad. It was. And I was done playing houseguest to people who thought I was disposable. By noon, I had everything cataloged and ready. Now it was just a matter of pressing send. I didn't write a long message. Didn't explain what he was looking at. Didn't give it a title like, "Read this" or "You need to know." That would have made it emotional. This wasn't emotional. I opened a new message. Attached a 9-minute video montage titled Karen, Household Behavior, MP4, and addressed it to my father's work email. No subject line, no body text, just 2 words. Watch this. I hit send, closed the laptop, packed my things, and left the house before either of them noticed. I didn't go far, just a library on the other side of town. Air-conditioned, quiet, somewhere neutral. I sat in the corner and waited. Didn't check my phone, didn't pace, just waited. I'd spent the last month trying to avoid a fight, hoping things would level out, trying to make peace with people who saw me as a burden. But there's a difference between being quiet and being compliant. And I wasn't compliant anymore. The montage was straightforward. I'd spent 2 hours the night before putting it together. Each clip trimmed and time-stamped. It opened with Karen reading my journal, then cut to her calling me a freeloader, then the food tampering, Bryce laughing, me in the hallway, the sickness, her punchline about responsibility. I didn't add music. Didn't add commentary. Let the silence do the work. The video ended with a still shot from the hallway cam. Me, hunched outside the bathroom door, hands braced on the wall, sweat down my back. It lingered there for 6 seconds before cutting to black. At 3:41 p.m., my phone buzzed. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then another buzz. A message this time. We need to talk. I didn't answer that one either. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't trust what he'd say while they were still in the same house. He'd seen the truth now. Not filtered through excuses. Not diffused by secondhand stories. Just the raw, uncut footage of what he'd allowed. I walked outside into the sun. Warm breeze. No sound but the rustle of trees and the soft hum of a delivery truck turning the corner. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting for something to happen. It already had. When I got back that evening, the house was quieter than usual. Not calm, just quiet in that particular way that happens after something heavy drops. No TV. No music. Just the sound of Bryce's fork scraping against a plate, Karen's footsteps moving from kitchen to hallway, hallway to kitchen, like she couldn't decide where to be. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Didn't say a word. Bryce glanced up from his phone and stared. Not smug this time, just watchful, like he was waiting for the next move. I walked to the fridge, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. Karen left the room. Bryce followed. Silence folded in around me again. My dad came home just before 8. He didn't say anything at first, just set his keys down like always, pulled off his jacket, then stopped in the middle of the kitchen like he'd forgotten why he came in. We need to talk, he said finally. I didn't turn around. About what? A beat. Then another. He didn't push. I turned then, just enough to see him leaning against the door frame. Shoulders sagging. Mouth set in a line that looked more tired than angry. And in his eyes, for the first time in a long while, shame. Not confusion, not frustration, shame. He'd seen it, all of it, and there was no way to unsee it. Karen stayed out of sight the rest of the night. Bryce slammed his bedroom door around 10. My dad sat in the den with the lights off, the TV on mute. I passed him on my way to the kitchen. He didn't speak. Neither did I. Some things don't need to be said twice. The next morning, I didn't wait for him to start the conversation. I sat across from him at the kitchen table while he stirred instant coffee like it might turn itself into something stronger. "I want to talk," I said. He nodded. Waited. "Karen's been violating my privacy for weeks, reading my journal, digging through my things, setting me up." No reaction. "Bryce has followed her lead, mocking me, insulting me, encouraging her." Still nothing. "I've been treated like a squatter in the house I grew up in. And you've let it happen." He looked down into his coffee. "I've just been trying to keep peace." I shook my head. "No. You've been avoiding conflict. That's different." He sighed, rubbed his face. "It's complicated, Nathan. Karen's been through a lot. Bryce, too. So have I. I thought if I didn't choose sides." "You did. By staying silent, you did." He finally looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw it again, the shame, deeper this time, now that it had been named. "You're right," he said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, I know. I didn't know how bad it had gotten." "You did," I said. "You just didn't want to deal with what that meant." The silence after that wasn't tense, just hollow. He stood, poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. His hands were shaking a little. "I'll talk to her," he said. "Okay. She may not. That's not my problem." He nodded. Didn't argue. I stood, too, took my mug to the sink, looked out the window at the backyard I used to play in. Nothing had changed. Same uneven grass, same leaning fence, but it felt smaller now, faded. "I'm not staying here much longer," I said. He didn't ask where I'd go, didn't ask when. He just said, "I understand." And for the first time since I'd moved back in, I believed him. I gave it another week. Not because I hoped things would change, but because I needed time to line everything up. Job offer, lease, storage, logistics. Clean breaks take planning. When I told my dad I was leaving, he just nodded. "Where to?" he asked. "Denver," I said. "Job starts next month. Decent salary, benefits. Nothing fancy, but it's a start." He looked relieved, which stung more than I expected. "Glad to hear it," he said. We stood in the garage. Neutral ground. The same place where I used to help him with tools and oil changes and scraped knees. The air smelled like gasoline and dust, and something faintly nostalgic. I handed him a flash drive, labeled in black marker, "House Recordings." "In case you ever forget what you allowed," I said. He didn't take it right away, just stared at it like it might burn his hand. "I won't forget," he said eventually, voice low. "I don't want to." I set it on the workbench beside him. "No hard feelings," I said. "But no more pretending. Karen didn't come out to say goodbye. Bryce didn't either. I don't know if they were even home. If they were, they made sure to stay invisible. That was fine by me. I didn't need one last performance." My dad followed me to the car, hands in his pockets. "You ever need anything?" "I'll be all right," I said. He nodded. Looked like he wanted to say more. Didn't. I closed the trunk, got in, started the engine. Didn't cry, didn't flinch, just drove. Some exits don't need drama, just direction. 3 weeks later, I was unpacking a set of kitchen knives in a one-bedroom apartment with creaky floors and a window view of a parking lot. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The job was steady, writing ad copy for a small agency downtown. Not glamorous, but consistent. I made coffee in the mornings, went for walks in the evenings, started sleeping through the night again. One afternoon I got a voicemail. Dad's voice. Hesitant. "Karen and Bryce are gone. She left 2 days ago. Took her things, didn't say much. I didn't know how bad it was. I'm sorry." He paused, like he wanted to add something, then ended it with, "Call if you want to talk." I didn't. I just saved the message, labeled it, filed it away next to a folder of documents marked closed. Not because I hated him. Because some things don't need to be reopened to be remembered. Later that week, I bought a new clock for the living room. No camera, no surveillance. Just time. Ticking forward. That was enough. It was raining the night. I watched it one last time. I sat at my kitchen table, headphones on, the old flash drive plugged into my laptop. Same grainy footage. Same moments I'd memorized without meaning to. Karen in my room, flipping through pages she had no right to touch. Bryce grinning like he was in on a joke no one else understood. My own voice, distant and calm, never quite rising. I scrubbed through the timeline, stopped at the lasagna clip, played it through, watched myself eat, watched myself suffer, watched them laugh. It didn't hit the same anymore. Not like a wound. More like scar tissue, something I could touch now without flinching. I leaned back, hands folded, listening to the hum of the fridge and the low drum of rain on the window. It had taken me months to get here. To a place where this didn't define me, only explain a part of the story. I hovered over the folder. Evidence. Final. Then clicked. Delete. The screen blinked. Gone. Not out of rage. Not to forget. But because I didn't need the evidence anymore. I had the truth, and it had done its job. I made a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching headlights streak across wet pavement. I didn't hate them, not Karen, not Bryce, not even my dad. Hate takes energy. This wasn't that. It was something cleaner, something quieter. Understanding. Not everyone earns access to you. Not everyone who shares blood deserves space in your life. And not every silence means surrender. Sometimes it means survival. Sometimes it's the only safe answer. I thought about all the nights I stayed quiet, hoping someone would notice. That if I just held still long enough, the truth would float to the surface. It never did until I recorded it myself. And maybe that's the lesson. I turned off the lights, sat in the dark for a moment, letting the quiet settle. Then I said it. Softly. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I used to think family meant loyalty. But real family doesn't make you prove your pain to be believed. Sometimes, silence is survival, and a camera is the only voice they'll listen to. Then I turned off the screen and walked forward into a life that finally felt mine. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.